It was a crisp May morning in Washington, D.C., the kind where politics feels like theater, and every word could make or break a career. The set of Fox News Morning glowed in patriotic blues and reds as host Brian Kilmeade leaned into the desk, eyes locked on his guest. Sitting across from him, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene wore a confident smirk, the kind that suggested she was ready to stir something. Brian asked, "What do you make of the growing influence of Burkina Faso's president, Ibrahim Traoré? He's been getting a lot of attention lately." Greene rolled her eyes. "Oh, please," she scoffed. "Ibrahim Traoré is just another so-called African reformer. These guys love to talk about democracy while inflating numbers to look good." Burkina Faso, she let out a sarcastic laugh. "It's a corrupt, bankrupt state, and the liberal media is eating up his propaganda like it's gospel." The camera didn't miss a beat. The moment was live, global, and what she said next made the internet explode. "I'm tired of American politicians bending over backward for these African strongmen. We keep acting like they're doing something special, when all they're doing is begging for Western aid." The clip was less than 60 seconds, but it was all the world needed. Within hours, it ricocheted across social media, especially in African nations. In Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, hashtags like "Respect Africa" and "I Stand with Traoré" began trending. Thousands of young Africans recorded video responses, not in anger, but in disappointment, stating plainly, "We're not props for American ego." At the presidential palace in Burkina Faso, President Ibrahim Traoré watched the segment in silence, surrounded by a small circle of advisors. While others bristled, he simply leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "She doubts our honesty," he finally said, his voice calm. "Then let's show the world who's truly playing games with the truth." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't issue a counterattack. What he ordered was far more dangerous for Greene's career, a global stage built on facts. In that moment, the story shifted. It was no longer just about a soundbite or a morning show. It became the opening move in a much bigger game. One where calm intelligence would be pitted against arrogance, and where the world would watch, not to see who could yell the loudest, but who could stand the tallest in silence. The room was quiet, almost too quiet. As the video stopped playing, President Ibrahim Traoré leaned forward, eyes still fixed on the paused image of Congresswoman Greene mid-sentence, her expression frozen in arrogance. Around him, the air was electric, with restrained fury. His chief of staff looked ready to snap a pen in half. His economic advisor was already muttering about colonial mindsets. The press secretary paced behind the desk, fists clenched. But Traoré, he exhaled slowly, then stood up. "If she questions our honesty," he said, his voice smooth and measured, "we won't argue. We'll educate." The shift in tone changed everything. He didn't want a statement. He didn't want outrage. He wanted a strategy. "Call Yakuba," he said, "and get Fatimata. We have work to do." Within the hour, the presidential office had transformed into a command center. Maps, reports, and digital projections flickered on large displays. Screens showed clips of Greene's past interviews. One headline read, "Greene suggests Jewish space lasers caused wildfires." Another congresswoman pushes school shooting conspiracy. Communications Director Yakuba Sawadogo stepped forward. We've documented 27 public falsehoods from her office in the last 2 years. He reported. All verifiable. All reckless. Catalog them. Traoré replied. We don't need to insult her. We just need the facts. Fatimata Sawadogo, the nation's economy minister, entered with a folder. She says we're a corrupt, bankrupt country, she said dryly. But according to the World Bank, our poverty rate dropped by 14% over the past 3 years. Meanwhile, her own district in Georgia has seen rising homelessness and school closures. Traoré smiled, not out of satisfaction, but precision. A congresswoman from a struggling district accuses us of failure, he said. Interesting. Then came the boldest idea of the day. Let's not play defense, he said. Let's invite her to the global stage. A live debate, moderated by an international journalist. Let the world decide who's lying. For a moment, the room fell silent again. You want to debate her? On television, his press secretary asked. No. Traoré replied. I want her to have every chance to explain herself with the world watching. Within hours, an official invitation was drafted and sent to Greene's office. It wasn't a trap. It was a mirror. A chance for her to defend her claims or reveal what truly lay beneath them. The invitation went public that same night. The headlines the next morning were brutal African president challenges Greene to live debate. Let the facts speak. Calm clapback. Ibrahim Traoré sets the stage for global truth test. As social media lit up with speculation, one thing became clear. This wasn't going to be a shouting match. This was going to be a reckoning. And the man who planned it never once raised his voice. By sunrise, the presidential palace no longer resembled a government building. It was a war room, one where the weapons weren't missiles or threats, but cold, indisputable facts. Yakuba Sawadogo, the communications chief, sat hunched over a glowing laptop. His screen displayed a timeline year after year of every public statement made by Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene that had been flagged, fact-checked, or outright debunked. From outrageous conspiracies about wildfires to denying verified tragedies, the list was long and damning. He tapped the space bar on the wall-mounted monitor. Greene's infamous Jewish space lasers, quote, played in full color. He shook his head. This isn't opposition research. This is a pattern of delusion. President Traoré entered quietly, scanning the wall of headlines and footage. How many incidents, he asked. 27. Yakuba answered. All confirmed. All public. We've triple-sourced each one. Good. Traoré said calmly. Let her speak. We'll only hold up the mirror. Meanwhile, in the Ministry of Economy across town, Fatimata Sawadogo compiled a data sheet that would redefine the narrative. She projected 2 graphs side by side. One showed Burkina Faso's progress over 3 years poverty reduction, rising literacy, and improved child mortality rates. The other data, pulled from Greene's own congressional district, showing increased food insecurity, lower education funding, and a recent spike in opioid-related deaths. Fatimata turned to her staff. This isn't just a rebuttal. This is the truth. No one expected from Africa. Traoré reviewed the final slide deck at sunset. We won't attack her, he reminded them. We'll simply compare realities. But it wasn't just numbers. A multimedia team created a digital presentation clean, polished, and timed to the second. Every chart had a source. Every quote had a date. Every claim Greene had made was placed beside internationally verified evidence to the contrary. When the news broke that Traoré had officially challenged Greene to a live, internationally moderated debate, the world blinked. The media ran with it, from silence to strategy. African president sets the stage for global accountability. Traoré prepares devastating, fact-based response to Greene's accusations. The story became unavoidable. Back in Washington, Greene's team scrambled. She paced her office, chewing her lip. "He wants to debate me live," she asked. Incredulous, her chief of staff nodded. "And it looks like he's got receipts." Greene scoffed. "He's just an African president. How dangerous could this be?" But the danger wasn't in his voice. It was in his preparation. And as the digital presentation file was finalized and locked under the name Truth vs. Play, Noise, Ibrahim Traoré stood at the palace balcony, looking out at the lights of Ouagadougou. He wasn't angry. He wasn't loud. But the quiet ones, they're often the ones with the sharpest aim. Capitol Hill was unusually quiet for a Thursday afternoon. But inside Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene's office, the tension was anything but. The moment her press secretary stepped in holding a printed copy of President Traoré's formal debate invitation, Greene barely glanced up. "What is it?" Her aide hesitated. "He's challenging you. A live, internationally broadcast debate. Moderated by Christiane Amanpour." She laughed. "You've got to be kidding. This is what some kind of PR stunt." But when she saw the branding on the press release, slick, professional, translated into 5 languages, something shifted. Her chief of staff leaned in. "It's already trending in Europe and Africa. CNN's picked it up. BBC too." Greene waved them off. "Let them talk. He's African. We're not afraid of statistics from a third world country." But as the hours passed, her confidence began to crack. She clicked open the link to a Dropbox folder someone had anonymously shared with her team. Inside a preview of the presentation, Ibrahim Traoré's staff had been preparing. Slide after slide, clean, cited, brutal. There was her quote about Jewish space lasers, layered over headlines from international outlets, condemning it. Another slide compared Burkina Faso's literacy rate improvements to her district's drop in high school graduation rates. One section tracked her voting record on education cuts against Burkina Faso's investment in youth entrepreneurship. She scrolled faster. Then she froze. A headline: Greene's COVID disinformation linked to community health backlash. Underneath it, footage of her speaking at a rally, calling vaccines mind control tools. She slammed the laptop shut. "This is an ambush," she snapped. Her comms director cleared his throat. "No, ma'am. It's preparation." For the first time, she understood this wasn't a random African leader with a podium and a temper. This was a strategist measured, precise, and quietly brilliant. "He's no ordinary politician," she muttered. They tried digging. They looked for scandals, corruption, policy contradictions. Nothing stuck. Traoré had a military background, but no history of abuses. He had advanced degrees in political science and economics, spoke fluent French, English, Arabic, and 2 native dialects. Married. No offshore accounts. No leaked audio. No burner phones. Greene's staff grew disparity. Get me data on Burkina Faso's poverty rates. She barked. Her economic aide returned hours later. He's actually improved them. And international monitors back it up. Her hands trembled slightly. She opened her notes. Her usual playbook anger. Mockery. Deflection suddenly felt thin. You're telling me I have to walk into a live debate with a man who's got every receipt and the moral high ground. Silence. The storm was no longer coming. It was already inside the building. May 30th, 2025. The world had seen debates before, but nothing like this. Not with this kind of weight. Not with this much silence before the storm. 89 countries broadcast the event. Live. Over 20 million people tuned in within the first hour. News anchors called it a geopolitical anomaly. Social media dubbed it the reckoning. Inside the Geneva Forum studio, the atmosphere felt more like a courtroom than a television set. Cameras locked in. Earpieces tested. Lights dimmed. At center stage, journalist Christiane Amanpour sat between two figures who could not have looked more different. On her left, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, jaw clenched, knuckles white, heels clicking nervously as she adjusted her mic. On her right, President Ibrahim Traoré, calm, composed, his suit modest, his eyes steady. No notes in front of him. Amanpour opened. Congresswoman Greene, you've claimed President Traoré inflates data and deceives the world. What specific evidence supports this accusation? Greene straightened. Well, first of all, his numbers come from agencies that are often manipulated by foreign governments. I mean, let's not pretend these aren't cooked. And which agencies specifically? World Bank. UN. Who? They all have agendas, she said. Amanpour's eyebrows raised. You're saying international institutions can't be trusted. But your claims, based on no documentation, should be. Greene shifted in her seat. Amanpour turned to Traoré. He didn't blink. All of our national progress data is independently verified. He said gently, we publish quarterly. Our numbers are audited. The same can't be said for the accusations made against us. He reached into the folder before him and unfolded a single sheet. A timeline. We took the liberty of compiling some of the Congresswoman's most notable public statements, he said, placing it beside Amanpour. On screen behind him, a display flicked on. Headline after headline filled the wall. Green vaccines are mind control. School shootings were staged. Jewish space lasers behind wildfires. Each followed by timestamps, video links, and international fact checks. This is a personal attack, Greene snapped. It's relevant. Traoré replied calmly. You called me a liar. I'm simply demonstrating a pattern of truth avoidance. She tried to interrupt, but Amanpour held up her hand. President Traoré. Is this retaliation? No. He said. It's an invitation to hold both of us accountable to the same standard. The silence that followed was deafening. But then Greene leaned forward and made the mistake that would define her career. You people, she began. Eyes narrowing. The room froze. Amanpour's mouth opened slightly. Even the crew stopped moving. You people, Traoré echoed softly. Greene swallowed. And then, like glass shattering in a marble hall, the moment broke. I see. Traoré continued. Then your accusations were never really about statistics. They were about something else entirely. The screen behind them faded to black. But the damage had been done. and the whole world saw it live. The silence didn't last long. Within seconds of Marjorie Taylor Greene's words, "You people" hitting the airwaves, the internet detonated. The clip spread like wildfire. No edits. No voiceover. No music. Just her voice. And the echo of decades of prejudice. Twitter, now branded X, trended globally under number "You people." TikTok creators stitched the moment with stunned faces and captions like, "Did she really just say that across Africa?" There was no anger, just bitter recognition. College students in Lagos shook their heads. Journalists in Nairobi called it casual racism broadcast in high definition. In Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso, people gathered outside the presidential palace, watching a projector stream of the broadcast under the stars. They didn't cheer. They just stood there, arms crossed, eyes locked on their president, who never raised his voice. Traoré waited for the moment to settle. Then he spoke. "Congresswoman Greene," he said gently, "I want to thank you. You've confirmed that your accusations stem not from verified data, but from something deeper, a worldview, one that assumes we're less." Amanpour looked away for a beat, clearly stunned. Greene opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Traoré turned to the audience. "When we are doubted, we do not respond with rage. We respond with records, with results, with resilience." Applause erupted. Not from the moderators, not from his team, but from the studio's international observers, academics, diplomats, reporters. They didn't clap for show. They clapped because something unspoken had finally been spoken. Greene stood up, trembling. "This is character assassination." "No," Traoré replied. "It's clarity." And that was the end of the debate. But it was only the beginning of the fallout. Within hours, Greene's political allies began distancing themselves. Congressman Eli Martin, once her staunch supporter, tweeted, "We must always choose dignity over division." Corporate donors pulled funding. Georgetown University rescinded her upcoming speaking engagement. Major outlets from CNN to Al Jazeera ran segments replaying her words beside Traoré's response. And the public, they didn't forget. Petitions for a formal House Ethics Committee review reached over 1 million signatures in 2 days. Meanwhile, in Burkina Faso, Traoré returned home, not just as a president, but as a symbol. In his next press briefing, he wore no suit, just a simple local tunic, standing before students, saying, "Respect doesn't have a passport. Truth doesn't need translation." The world leaned in. European capitals invited him for diplomatic visits. The African Union issued a rare statement, calling him a voice of wisdom in an age of noise. Back in the U.S., Greene canceled all press appearances. Her approval ratings dropped 22 points overnight. And in a closed-door GOP strategy meeting, her own party leadership asked, how much longer can she survive this? The answer, not long. Because once the mask slips on live television, it can never be worn again. A week after the debate, the halls of Congress felt colder. Marjorie Taylor Greene's office door remained shut. Once a hotspot of conservative media activity, it now felt like a forgotten wing. Staffers walked by without making eye contact. Reporters stopped calling. Even her usual defenders had gone silent. Her inbox overflowed, not with support, but with headlines she couldn't ignore. Greene's global gaffe sparks. Bipartisan ethics review. Traoré calm, dismantling, resonates across continents. When truth sounds like grace, the speech that changed the debate on race and power. And then came the letter official notice that a Republican challenger had filed to run against her in the upcoming primary. Her team tried to reassure her. "You still have your base," they said. "People will move on." They hoped. But she wasn't listening. She was watching footage of Traoré speaking at the United Nations General Assembly just days after the debate. Dressed in a traditional embroidered tunic, Ibrahim Traoré stood beneath the blue and gold seal of the UN and delivered a message that echoed beyond politics. "When we are mocked, we don't retaliate with mockery," he said. "We respond with truth. When we're doubted, we don't demand respect. We demonstrate why we deserve it." He didn't mention Greene by name. He didn't need to. The world already knew. His words drew a standing ovation, not just from African leaders, but from diplomats across Europe, Asia, and South America. The New York Times called it a masterclass in restraint and power. CNN dubbed him the quiet revolutionary. And then came the honors. Harvard University extended an invitation for Traoré to join as a visiting professor in global governance. UNESCO awarded him the Human Dignity Prize, their highest recognition for moral leadership in public life. Meanwhile, Greene was uninvited from 2 conservative policy forums. Fox News canceled her next appearance without explanation. Even her former allies began referring to her in the past tense. 1 year later, she stood on stage at a poorly attended campaign rally, trying to rekindle the fire. But the crowd was thinner, the applause weaker. Her voice shook not from nerves, but from irrelevance. Back in Ouagadougou, a statue of Traoré had quietly gone up, not of him in a suit or with a microphone, but of him standing beside children, holding books in one hand and a seedling in the other. An artist's inscription read, "Truth doesn't shout. It grows." When asked about Greene in a post-UN interview, Traoré only smiled. "She tried to humiliate me with lies," he said softly. "But sometimes, your enemies hand you the very stage they hoped you'd fall from." And just like that, he rose not just as a leader of a nation, but as a voice for a world weary of noise, longing for clarity. The interview was quiet. No crowd, no podium, just soft lighting, a camera lens, and a single question. If you could say one final thing to the Congresswoman, what would it be? President Ibrahim Traoré looked down for a moment, then looked up. "She tried to humiliate me with lies," he said, his voice steady, but in doing so, she created the opportunity for truth to be seen more clearly than ever. The camera held on his face. No smugness, no malice, just composure. She thought she was attacking a man. He continued. But she was speaking to a continent. And when she looked down on us, the world finally looked up. That clip alone gathered over 15 million views in 24 hours. But by then, the story wasn't about Marjorie Taylor Greene anymore. She had become a footnote, a warning about what happens when ego overrides empathy. When bias masquerades as patriotism. Her primary challenger surged ahead in the polls. Editorials called her downfall, self-inflicted, surgically accelerated by silence. She declined all further interviews. Traoré, on the other hand, didn't celebrate. He moved on. In Burkina Faso, his administration rolled out new international education partnerships, inspired by the attention, offering scholarships to rural students, launching cultural exchange programs, and broadcasting a series titled Redefining Leadership. One episode began with the phrase, "Real power is when you don't need to speak louder because truth has already done the speaking." Meanwhile, Georgetown University began a new lecture series called The Traoré Doctrine, analyzing how leaders can transform insult into insight, conflict into conversation. Global outlets praised his approach, not just as political brilliance, but moral clarity. The BBC said, he redefined what it means to win a debate by refusing to play the game of outrage. At a youth summit in Johannesburg, Traoré stood before thousands of students and told them, "You don't need to clap back. You don't need to raise your voice. Just carry your facts like a lantern and watch who runs from the light." The crowd erupted, and across oceans, in classrooms, coffee shops, and political roundtables, people weren't quoting Greene anymore. They were quoting him. From a 1-minute smear to a full-scale awakening, the story had flipped. Not by chance, by choice. A choice to remain calm. A choice to fight ignorance, not with fury, but with poise. And as the camera slowly faded on his final interview, Traoré offered just 6 words to sum it all up. "She gave me the mic. I listened. And the world, it listened too."